The final lecture of this school year. What can and should we expect from our constitutional American Republic? Should we expect the ability to suddenly transform society into a new and better form? No. Our founders were deeply distrustful of rapid change and fundamental change. They set up a constitution that could change and has over time. But the Constitution is not easy to change, and it cannot change quickly. The same is true for big laws. They have to be brought through legislature. In the case of the federal legislature, they've got to go through 2 houses of Congress and a conference committee, and then the president has to sign on or veto, and then if they want to override the veto, they've got to get a supermajority. And that's just passing the law. Then it comes to enforcing the law, which is the job of executives in states and localities and the federal government, excuse me. And then there's the question of what the courts will think. Because people subject to this new law might think it's unconstitutional and might challenge it in court. And that challenge could result in a Supreme Court decision that invalidates the whole thing. That has been done many times. The American Republic is not designed to make a better utopian world. You'd better understand this. The Constitution is not there for progress. Its primary goal is to preserve freedom and liberty on an individual level. And if you're a person that believes that the free choices of people is the problem, for example, if you're an environmentalist and you think, oh, what a shame it is that people can drive trucks and SUVs and eat ground beef and steak and do all sorts of other things that we as environmentalists don't approve of, then you think freedom is the problem. Be honest with yourself. If freedom is the problem, you're not going to find many ways of using the American system of government to control the freedom of others. I say that at that point, in American tradition, you try persuading people to live differently. Instead of trying to force them with laws, you try convincing them. And people have been convinced in this country of all sorts of things over the years. It's not a bad way to go. You try to persuade, you try to convince. But you don't try to force, because the Constitution is not designed to limit the freedom of your fellow citizens just to satisfy your own personal set of imperatives and beliefs. If you are somebody that really, really, really enjoys the idea of looking down at society and fixing it like an engineer, like you're some sort of god, you will find the American system deeply frustrating, because it is designed to stop people just like you. Tyrants are not necessarily people just like you, because I'm sure you have good intentions. Some tyrants have good intentions, others don't. But what unifies all people who could be called tyrants is a willingness and a desire to control others. You'd better think very carefully before you try to control another person. First of all, are you able to control yourself? If you can't control yourself, trying to control others is morally dubious. Secondly, what makes your judgment so much better than theirs? Don't delude yourself into thinking that you have the only right opinion. That's the road to fanaticism and zealotry. No, there are good people who are on both sides of the environmental issue. There are good people on both sides of the issue of whether we want President Trump or a Democrat. There are good people on both sides of all issues, or almost all issues. The American system is not designed to help you make the world a better place. And it's not designed to give you an amplifier to make a difference, man. The American system is designed to preserve the freedom and liberty of your fellow Americans. who have a right to speak what you consider to be falsehood, who have a right to choose what you consider to be evil, who have a right to live according to dictates that make no sense to you and that you disagree with. That's America. And it requires something that lots of people tout and talk about, but often are quite hypocritical about. It requires tolerance. If you can't handle that there are some people who cling to their God and their guns, their pickup trucks, their traditional way of life, who have no problem working in a coal mine or using coal-derived electricity, who do not believe the environmental scientists who are so often contradicting themselves, ice age, no, global warming, no, man-made climate change, because whatever it is, temperature, sea levels. If you are not persuaded to that way of thinking about the world, you are not going to look at the human race as a giant planetary problem. You're going to see things very differently. In America, people have a right to. They have a right to say, no, we don't agree with your most cherished positions. No, we don't agree with your conclusions. No, we are not going to obey your dictates. Freedom involves the ambiguity of saying at what point does our own sense of right and wrong become oppressive to others. Most of us would agree. Rape, child molestation, kidnapping, murder, bank robbery, all wrong. Arson, wrong. Theft, wrong. Those are traditional ideas of crime. But is there a difference between somebody beating the heck out of a guy on the street, yelling a bunch of obscenities, you bleep and bleep, I'm going to bleep, 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 and somebody doing the same exact thing, shouting racial slurs? We have, since the 90s, been exploring in our legal system the concept of hate crime, which is a disturbing thought to me, because all crime is bad. And I tend to think if somebody's saying, you're a bleepy bleep, 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 there's probably some hate involved. But there are certain things that if you do while shouting racial slurs, you have now committed a different crime. Because not only are you guilty of assault and maybe attempted murder, but you're guilty of a hate crime. Is that reasonable? Is the crime the assault, or is the crime calling somebody a bleep? Most of us want a society that's safe for children to grow up in. Most of us want a society safe enough for us to walk down the street day or night without being too afraid. Most of us want to be able to leave things in our yard without them being stolen. Most people would not like to walk around like I do, armed, when I'm not on campus. Most people want a reasonably peaceful society in which to live their lives. And that means that traditional ideas of crime are things that most Americans would say, yes, we are going to impose our basic standards on the society. And if you steal, if you kill, if you do other nasty things, we're going to catch you and we're going to imprison you and maybe we're going to punish you. But at what point do you stop calling something a crime and start acknowledging that it's simply a different point of view? In a dictatorship, it's very easy to see that line. In communist China, it's very easy. Whatever the party says is okay. Whatever the party denies is crime. But in America, one of the great arguments between left and right is, where do we draw the line between crime and free choice? So, what I've asked you to do this week is think about whether or not you think that human beings are basically good with a problem society, or whether you think people are basically evil but can choose to overcome that. What do you think crime is, and where do you think crime comes from? Do you think that behavior choices and ideological decisions are something that we should criminalize? Are you a legalist? Or do you tend to believe in allowing people the widest latitude? Do you believe that the freedom of others endangers the world? In which case, your job is to control it. Do you understand that the American government is designed to slow change down, requiring election after election after election, court decision after court decision after court decision, executive order? All these things have to dovetail for years in order for a fundamental change to happen, because the system that we have now may be imperfect, but it grants the widest possible latitude for personal choice and freedom. And if you mess with that, you could end up unexpectedly creating a totalitarian police state, which is the antithesis of the American Republic, and it's the antithesis of the kind of personal freedom that allows you to decide what your life is and who you're going to be in it. I hope that you thought about these things this year. I hope you think about them now, because as I'm planning your final right now, these thoughts matter, and I'll ask you to explore and explain them. It's been a pleasure working with you this year. You know, I'm a history teacher first. I'm not really a civics teacher, but they asked me to do this job, and I've tried my best. I hope that I've gotten you to think about worthwhile things, and I hope that your own ideas, not because of me, but because you've been thinking about them, have grown. It's been my pleasure and privilege and honor teaching you, and I hope to see as many of you as possible in my ancient history class next fall. Have a good summer. Have a delightful summer. Get your work done. See the videos, make your comments, do your judiciary exam, and do your final exam. Everything's due Wednesday, May 20th, 6 a.m. or earlier. Take care.